This is a forgery. For the real thing, come to the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop in Chicago.
All right, so here is Cotting in central Illinois, an abolitionist, and this is one of the scarcest, I guess the three scarcest campaign biographies would be Vaux's, I think is scarcer than Cotting, and a very small little piece too, that you say did not get an agent, and maybe that's why. Howard, which hadn't been found because it wasn't used, it wasn't bought, and Cotting, perhaps because the Republican Party wanted this smashed immediately and destroyed, because Cotting was an abolitionist. But he said, am I right, that he's not one of us, but he sounds good. And he's closer to us than anyone else. We should
Right.
ride his horse.
Right. The message that was circulated among Lincoln's backers and the Republican Party in general, and Lincoln campaign biographies in general, was that Lincoln was a moderate when it came to the issue of slavery. He didn't like slavery. He thought it was morally offensive. He didn't want it to expand, but he felt that because of the constitutional constraints, that he could not interfere with slavery where it already existed. That was sort of the moderate approach that many Republicans had. However, the radical Republicans and abolitionists, of course, wanted immediate abolition of slavery. The Republican Party in 1860 and Lincoln himself did not want to offend those more moderate Republicans or even conservative Republicans, and also former know-nothings, and even pro-war Democrats. He wanted them on his side. He was a very shrewd politician. And I believe the reason that Cotting's, there weren't many printed of Cotting, and this is, I think, Wesson brings this up, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, that they were afraid that something like this getting out there and circulating would alarm many moderate voters, Republicans as well as conservative Democrats, and that perhaps the Republican Party actually destroyed many of the print run. And that's why there are so few copies that are available today. I think it's, below 10 that have been identified, Dan?
Oh yes.
So, yeah. So that's the supposition, that they were destroyed and only a handful of Cotting's pamphlets survive today.
I'll tell you, campaign biographies are just so amazing. It's something I share with you in passion. And if you want out there to begin collecting something that's really fascinating and interesting and will put you in the moment, and as I said earlier, they're colorful and spectacularly written in some instances. They're really something. You'll learn a great deal about the culture and society as well as about Lincoln in these. It's a great area to be collecting in. And you're going to have a few you're going to have trouble finding, but that's the collecting process and the enjoyment of it. There's always one more thing to collect. Gary, I want to get back to the South for a moment, and I'm showing a letter of Judah Benjamin, who is, of course, one of the brains of the Confederacy, and I think that he was allowed to get the stature that he did, even though he was a Jew, because he'd never become the top spot. No one thought that he could become president, and so he wasn't against them. Sure, we can push him as far as we want because he won't get to the end. Here is one back all the way forward in London at Temple. He was one of the first Jew, I guess, to get into Temple and be one of the, certainly American, to be the counselor to the Queen as well. Briefly tell us this. I think of him as, excuse me, sorry for that he was involved, of course, you say, in some anti-Lincoln scheming, probably certainly after the Kilpatrick-Dahlgren raid, two things, kind of briefly though, but I mean, because let them read about this in the
Yes,
book.
yeah.
But two things. One, what was his relationship with Verena Davis? And secondly, do you think that he may have been part of a plot to assassinate Lincoln after that raid I just mentioned? And the thought was on that raid, perhaps they were trying to assassinate the cabinet and even up to the president. So, okay, two can do this game.
Yeah, I didn't see any evidence of this, and I've read, and of course the great biographer, at least in my opinion, so far the best we have of on Judah P. Benjamin is Eli Evans' book on
Wonderful book.
I don't think we have any clear evidence on that, but. The one thing that I would mention with regard to Benjamin that might be so interesting, because I don't know that we have anything clear to say about the assassination, and whether I mean it seems to me personally from my reading of it that he he was more interested in escape, but.
Which he did spectacularly.
Right, but the interesting thing that appears in this book that I don't think anybody else has ever written about at all has to do with the famous ongoing effort to try to draw the South and the North into a negotiated peace, and this happens, of course, periodically during the war. And what I show is that our friend Issachar Zachary, for those who have never heard his name before, Zachary is actually a foot doctor. And he works his way into the administration and eventually makes friends. There's no doubt about it. There's documented evidence. He becomes friendly with Lincoln.
And an agent for him.
He becomes an envoy. That's how I refer to him. Lincoln respects him. There's no question about this. He's not just somebody, as to use somebody else's phrase, he's not just trimming Lincoln's toenails. and Lincoln sends him down to New Orleans because this man Zachary has told Lincoln that if you want to win the hearts of this occupied city, you have to win the hearts of the Jews. They're very prominent in New Orleans, which was true. And many wealthy, prominent Jews already in that time. And so he sends Zachary down there. While he's down there, he's doing so well, Zachary reports back to Seward and to Lincoln, you give me a chance, I can meet with Judah P. Benjamin, and the two of us, these two Jews, we can negotiate a peace between the North and the South.
Yeah, you
Now,
tell this story.
right,
in the
and the only thing I have here that I wanted to mention is I found, with help at the Library of Congress, the letter that Issachar Zachary writes to Judah Benjamin the day after that meeting. We've always
and it's in here.
and it's in here.
It's well worth reading.
Right,
Well worth reading.
and he details clearly what they've talked about, and you see what a in a sense of, well, he's either a sycophant or he's a clever politician. We'll have to leave that up for interpretation. That our friend Dr. Zachary is. But that's the interesting thing here.
A real quick question. Were there any Jewish women that had any relationship with Lincoln? Not a relationship with Lincoln, but nonetheless had some impact.
Well, not that I can think of, except that we do have some evidence of the wives of various people who have written about or, make note of their contact with Lincoln and how charming he was, and so forth. That we do have that evidence, but not that I know of any specific example.
I'm going to put both of you to work for a moment, starting to sign some of these, if you would, if you need. And I just want to remind you that we have some upcoming events. We haven't had time to really look at everything that I want to and discuss it. These books are really replete with all sorts of other stories. The Jewish stock and trade story that is in Gary Zola's book, you've got to read. Gary, I wasn't sure if that could have been seen in some circles as anti-Semitic or astute. I'm not sure which way that would go. But it's how Lincoln said something about a Jew and what his stock and trade was. Read the book. What would Lincoln do? Question. That's in here. We didn't talk about, and some of the other people that really need to be heard from. Rabbi Wise, for instance, who had other ideas about Lincoln as well, not just adoration, and even after the assassination, but his thoughts and some of the Jewish critics that he had are also in this book. Julio Francis is one of these that we did not have a chance to talk about. Who were the Coventers and the NRA? The NRA is in this book. Maybe not the one you're thinking about, but
Right.
there is an NRA in this book. And of course, the infamous General Order Number 11
Yes.
from Ulysses S.
Yes,
Grant. That's in this book and studied carefully as well. And Isaac Wise, I think I mentioned. So that's in Gary's book. That a lot of interesting material in that, and some of the stories and the documents are priceless. Even in this thin book, it's so packed, and there are things that we really didn't get to, even though we talked about his character going from 60 to 64, but more of the changes from 60 to 64 and how it occurred for the different themes that were used. What was Joseph Medill to the Lincoln campaign, and how important was he? Also, the executive concentration of power you talk about in here. It's interesting that here we are thinking about, Lincoln was a Whig who thought Andy Jackson was concentrating power in the executive branch, and now libertarians today are ascribing the same faux pas, I guess, to Abraham Lincoln. We talk a bit about that in here. What the advances in communication were and literacy was in the country, and how that informed and helped to produce the campaign biography. So there's a great deal that we didn't get to, and also the rivals, even in more detail that we covered that were in this. So I want to thank Gary Zola, and I want to thank Tom Horrocks and Southern Illinois University Press once again for bringing them to us and this interesting virtual book signing. Those of you who came out today, thank you for being here. You can go back to the sunshine in a moment. And of course the staff, some of you will go to sunshine, some of you will be here with me for a little while. But nonetheless, thank you for helping support this as well. Thank you all. It was a
Thank you,
wonderful
Dan.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Come
Dan.
back again.
Thank you.
Thank you.